Okay, the purpose of this video is to show proper edge preparation on 1/4 inch thick steel plate, and it's going to be for an open butt weld, as we'll be putting two plates together such as this. We need to put a bevel on this edge here. And if you take a look right here, this is the side the shear cut from, so the shear cut down through this piece from this edge to the bottom edge. So with this little bit of a roll here on the edge, we want that to be towards the face of the weld when we go to weld it together. So that means we'll be putting a bevel on there on this sort of an angle. When we go to fit it up to the next piece beside it, we're also going to want to take a look and see which side the shear cut from. And in this case, the shear cut struck the face on this side, and it's cut down through the piece ending on this side. So with this little rolled edge here, we want that to be towards the face of the weld. So we'll be putting them together like this, and I'll show you edge preparation here in just a minute. Okay, we have our piece now in the vise, and we're going to start grinding the bevel on there. In this case, we want to leave a knife edge up to a nickel edge, and I'll describe on the board that in detail. We're going to start by grinding on this piece, and we'll get back to you in just a minute. Okay, this is what the edge preparation looks like for a nickel land. What that means is that this flat face here is a nickel wide, or 3/32 of an inch wide, and we have that bevel laid back, approximately a 37.5 degree bevel. If you go take a look at the chart over by the bender, it'll explain what bevel you should need for the thickness of plate. In this case, we have it laid back approximately a 37.5 degree bevel. So we're going to prep up the other piece, and we'll show you that. Okay, we got the other piece prepped up over there, also with a nickel land on it. Sometimes later I might see that we have a problem getting full penetration on the two plates. So this one is ground up to a knife edge. There's no land on that at all, so that means that this edge here is sharp, just like a knife. That's how they refer to it as, is a knife edge. So if you have problems with full penetration by leaving it a nickel land, nickel gap, then we would go to a knife edge on the next one. Now here's our two coupons with our edge preparation on there. You can see it has a little bit of a land on there. That's referring to the flat part on the edge. Instead of it being a knife edge, there's a little bit of a flat on there. I don't know if you can see it. But right here we're looking at about a nickel wide, or 3/32 of an inch wide. And when we go to put the two pieces together, we want to make sure that we have both our bevels going the same direction. We would slide the two of them together, so a gap between, so that when we look at the edge, they're even. Okay, and it makes a little V. Now some of the instructions have a backing plate. This here is the backing plate, and in that instance this backing plate would be slid behind the two pieces. Okay, now some projects have a backing plate added extra, and this is what the backing plate is. These two pieces would be situated in the middle of the backing plate. Place the two pieces on the top so that you have something solid to weld against. And then once you take your bend straps out of it, you would be grinding that backing plate off. Make sure that you have the backing plate in the center and that it's even on both sides. You want to take a pretty good gap in there, because we want to tie that, our parent material, to the backing plate, leaving enough space in the middle so that it's not a real tight gap and we have a hard time getting down in there. We want to make sure we tie this plate to the backing plate. Now in our instance, we're not going to be using a backing plate. It's going to be an open butt weld. So we're going to get a couple of shims underneath the plate here to get it up off the table so we don't weld it to the table when we weld it. And we'll get back to you in just a minute. Okay, we've got our plate set up on the table. We've got a gap in there. You can see that. And we have it fit up where our filler wire just slides in between there, so it's just a little bit loose. If we look at this back side of these edges here, we see that they're straight across. We don't want one a little higher than the other. We want to make sure that they're flat. Okay, that's called high-low. So we make sure our high-low is right on, so it's nice and flat. So I'm going to go ahead and put a tack at this end. Then that's going to warp the plates a little bit. I'll go ahead and straighten them out and put a tack at the other end. And we'll start there. Okay, we got our plate tacked up. One tack on each end. And the wire still slips in between the groove. Okay, now this varies from welder to welder. This is just the way that works for me. So if you're having a hard time filling the gap, then go ahead and tighten that up a little bit. And I'm using an 1/8 of an inch rod. There's nothing that says you can't use a 3/32 of an inch rod either. So I'm going to go ahead and start welding this, and the whole purpose of this is to get the weld down in the groove and to tie in the edges on the opposite side of the plate. So when we flip this over, both sharp edges we should not see. It's up to you if you want to try to fill it up in one pass. It might be a bit much. This one here will probably be 3 passes for me, which means that I'm going to run a root bead in there the whole way down, a hot pass, and then a cap to cap it all off. And again, I'll explain that on the board also in detail. So we'll get back to you as soon as I get the root in. Thanks. Okay, we just got our root bead in. Take a look at that. And we'll flip it over and see what we got on the other side. Okay, if we take a look, there are no sharp edges. And it's flush. We got quite a bit of scale built up in a couple of spots here. Once we grind all that off, we should have a nice finished and flat back piece. Okay, we're back to the front side. It didn't quite fill it up halfway, so we're going to go ahead and wire wheel it off. And it'll probably take a good 2 more passes to fill that up. So we'll take care of that and we'll continue on. Okay, we have our first, after our hot pass, we favored the side furthest away from us because the gap is just a little bit too wide to fill with one pass, so we're going to start stacking them in there and fill it up. And I'll show you again when we're ready to cap. Okay, there's our first pass on the cap, or the face of the weld. And I probably got one more to put on there because we want our weld bead to be meeting or beating the space material, which means you want it at least flush with a little bit of a crown. I prefer to have a little bit of a crown, that way there's no mistaking it. So when you look down the bead profile, there's a little bit of a crown there, and that's what we're going to be shooting for. So I got probably one more bead to put on there next to that one, and we should be good to go. Okay, here's the final product of stacked beads, one next to the other. What we're going to end up doing is letting this cool naturally. We do not want to quench it because that'll cause the metal to get more brittle and harden it. So we're going to let it cool naturally until it's cool to the touch, and then we're going to take it over and grind the face and the root flat and cut some strips, and then go over to the bender tensile puller. So once this cools, we'll come back and take care of all that. Okay, so this plate here is now a wire weld on here. For the oxyacetylene weld, it would obviously be oxyacetylene welded. We're going to be taking our straps out of here to bend. I already cut a 1-inch strap off the end here. Basically how we got it laid out is we waste the first inch on each side here, and the second inch is going to be our strap. So this section here is waste, this section here is our strap. And I'll show you how to cut this here in just a second with the torch. The straighter we make this cut, the less grinding we have to do. If we have big divots in here, that's going to be the thinnest part of the strap, which means that's where it's going to be bent. and that's not what we're trying to do here. We're going to eventually grind off the face and the root of this weld so the strap is the same thickness and the same width. So when we bend it, it all bends equally, and we're not cheating it one way or the other. So we'll do a torch cut here, and then we're going to show you a grind procedure, and then we're going to be bending the straps. Okay, here's our two straps that we're going to be bending. We're going to do one face bend and one root bend. The face bend is this side. It's the thicker face of the weld. Okay, so that's the side that we welded from. The opposite side is the root. Okay, so that would be the side where we have full penetration. What we're going to do is we're going to do a grinding procedure on here where we want all the grinding marks going with the strap. And then we're going to round off all four of these long edges. Okay, and then we're going to take it over to the bender. So we'll show you how to grind it here, and we'll head over to the bender. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to put a little grind mark on the face side of this. You can do it on the root side too, but what it is once we get this ground smooth, you're not going to be telling which side is which, face or root. So we're going to put a little mark on there for our reference later on. Okay, what we're going to do now is we're going to grind this root and the face off, and we want all the grinding marks going with the strap. So we're going to have the grinding wheel going on here such as this. Okay, now after we get the strap, we're going to grind that face and that root off. Okay, and as you can see, all the grinding marks go with the strap, which is what we want. It'll help you when you bend it. Now these four edges here got a lot of slag on them, and they're a little rough. So we're going to come over here, set it up in the vise. We're going to grind these nice and flat. Okay, and we're going to make them nice and flat and shiny. Then the second step is to round the four edges over. So I'm going to finish grinding this flat here a little bit, then I'm going to round the four edges over and show you what that looks like. An important note is that we don't want to grind this strap too thin in the middle. We want to make sure that the middle is just as thick as the parent material on both sides. When we go to bend it, that this isn't the thinnest part, because that would be cheating it a little bit. Well, then it would bend there. Okay, so what it is a hydraulic ram that pushes it and bends it, and a face bend would be bending it, opening up the face, and a root bend would be opening up the root. Okay, so we'll finish grinding this and show you what four round edges looks like, and we'll move on. Okay, so here's our finished strap. We have all the grinding marks going with the strap. We've got the four rounded edges, so it's a nice clean strap. And we have our reference mark on it to tell which side is what. So if you look at the end, we have four rounded edges here. And what that's going to do is help us out when we go over to the bend process. So let's go over and check it out. Okay, right here. Okay, in an earlier clip, one of the first couple on the series here, I referenced a chart over by the bender. This is a chart over by the bender. And it's going to tell you what plate thickness to use for what test you're doing. Okay, so here's the 1-inch unlimited thickness test. That's not what this video is about. It's more about this one. It's using 3/8 in this case. Here they're showing a 1/4 inch gap between the two. This one here is with a backing strip. The plates we're using are a 1/4 inch thick, and it's an open butt, so there's no backing strip on the back. This here is a go, no-go gauge that's on top of the bender here, and if your straps fit in the gauge, it's okay to be bent. If it does not fit in this gauge over here on the bender, you do not bend it in this bender because it'll break the bender, as has happened in the past. So here's a layout of them straps we just took. The first inch is junk, second inches are straps. First inch is junk, the second inches are straps. That's what we have. We're doing a root bend and a face bend. And we're going to go over to the bender now and we'll show you that.
There you go.
Okay, here we're at the bender. This hydraulic ram here is going to force between these two pins, and we're going to be bending our strap here. So we're going to turn the machine on. It's going to get a little noisy. We put our reference line on there here, which was on the face, and in this case we're going to do a face bend, so we're going to be forcing it towards the face. So we center it here between the two pins. We hit our toggle switch, make sure we're centered up, and we close the cover. Make sure on the cover it says close cover when testing. There's a lot of pressure being stored in here when it's forced through, and the strap will come popping out. So we hit the toggle switch and we bend the strap. This part takes a little time. Hopefully you don't hear any cracking or tinking. We'll inspect the final strap here in just a couple of seconds. Okay, so here's our final strap. We don't want to see any inclusions in there. If you had an 1/8 of an inch inclusion collectively, it would be a bad strap. And if you are in question about what an 1/8 of an inch is, you can go get an 1/8 inch filler rod and put on any inclusion you see open up. So this here on our face bend passes, and that's a good strap. Okay, and those corners, by rounding them off help this out to eliminate some of that stretch on each end. And that's a finished product right there. Okay, so here's the second strap. This one we're going to be doing a root bend, but here's that go, no-go gauge. So it fits in the gauge. Okay, it's pretty snug. Okay, but it fits. Here too, for the thickness, this also fits. Okay, so we're going to reference that line again. Here's our face. And we want to do a root bend this time, so we're going to be forcing it to the root. So we'll put it down in the bender. We'll hit our toggle switch here. And we'll be forcing it to the root. Again, make sure that door is closed. Okay, and here's a shot of the root bend. Try to get over here in the light a little bit. There's no inclusions. Okay, so that's another pass. So from edge preparation to fit up to the finished product, that's what we're looking for the strap test. Okay, and this simulates an actual state certification. Okay, we're at the practice for it. So that should be about it. Thanks a lot.